believe you've done this.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Grant's Plants. Today's video is going to be repotting a couple new orchids that I got at the orchid show today with my friend Isaac, who is also going to be a part of this video, who is right behind you guys filming. Bless you, you're the best. So yeah, we're going to be repotting a couple orchids. This one is a Masdevallia Imperial Flame. I'll include pictures for you guys so you can see. And then this one is the Cattelya lutomania Caesar Fernandez by Inferno. So I really love that one, just so you guys know.
So this video is just going to be kind of like a repot and kind of like orchid genus info kind of deal while I do it, just so it's kind of like a two-in-one.
Alright, so first up, again, is this Cattelya lutomania Caesar Fernandez by Inferno. There's the tag for you guys if you want to see. It's from Ecuador in Ecuador. Pretty cool. They were at my orchid show. They had a lot of good stuff, so a little shout out, I guess. So this one isn't going to be like a traditional repotting as if we've had it before and we're potting it from another pot, because this one came bare root, so it doesn't really have much media on it, so at least that part of the process is going to be pretty quick. It's just a few pieces of bark that we have to pick out, and it's also important that we do this because it's going into semi-hydro, which is an inorganic media, and if you have organic media in semi-hydro, it kind of just turns into a gross mess, and it's not good for your orchid because it can create an anaerobic situation, and orchid roots don't like that. So I'm just kind of going through and cutting out all the dead roots that we don't want in there. So you can tell living roots on Cattelyas because they're firm and usually green somewhat, and the dead ones kind of have that little filament showing, and the root tissue kind of just pulls right off. So that's how you kind of go through and pick which ones are alive and dead. So I'm just going to go through and cut all of those little dead things that I can tell, and then we will pot it into our pot.
High speed quality. High speed quality makes the day go by faster. That sound. No, you just need to take that clip of my voice. Play it over the whole video? Yeah.
So there weren't too many dead roots on here, so I think I might call that just about good. Everything else at least shows some living tissue. So I'm just going to kind of make sure that the roots are spread out a little bit so that our semi-hydro little balls can get in between them and hydrate them evenly, so they're kind of like splayed out like that. And this is our pot that it's going in. It's pretty much just like an old soup container, a plastic soup container that's clear, that I've melted 2 little holes into for the water to drain out of, which will create our water reservoir for the orchid. And as I'm doing this, I'll probably explain to you guys a little more about semi-hydro for those of you that may be new to it. Also, as we're potting this, we're going to want to look for the newest growths, and because this Cattelya is a sympodial orchid, it will grow usually in one direction, so you want the most possible growth for it to grow in that pot. So I'm going to place them facing forward. Anyways, semi-hydro, if you guys are new to it, just expanded clay pellets. And because they're so porous and have the same surface essentially, they will wick up the moisture from the bottom of the pot and create kind of like a moisture gradient, and it also allows for a lot of air to stay in the pot because there's little air pockets for the roots to grow in, and so they're essentially just getting the moisture directly from the surface of these little clay beads. And they seem to love them, especially Cattelyas. They are sometimes known for being very heavy water drinkers, and these, even in this system, it may drink all of the water in the reservoir within 2 to 3 days, maybe 4. But this system is extremely easy because you can see how much water is in there, and you can kind of gauge, not even if your orchid's dry or not, because there's no drying out with this. It is a constant moisture, which is why it's so cool, but you can gauge when you need to refill the reservoir very easily. So that's honestly about it for repotting it. I'm going to go through this side right here, because you can see that there's not a lot of clay balls that have filled in. And I found the easiest way to kind of get the clay balls to fill in is just squeezing like that. Not really squeezing very hard, but just enough to flex the pot so that the balls can kind of fall and fill in like that. And then you just kind of want to check to make sure there's no big gaps around any of the other roots. And this wasn't quite enough, so I'm just going to use some extra that I have prepared to kind of top it off. And that's just about it for this one. I'm going to stick the tag back in there before I lose it. But yeah, maybe just a little rant on semi-hydroponics. Now that you know a little bit about it, maybe you're interested. I'll give you the lowdown. So again, expanded clay media, it's inorganic, so it's very cool. It gives like minimal opportunity for like bacteria and fungus and stuff to grow. The only thing that you'll find is that because it's clear and there's water sitting in here, algae does tend to like grow around the bottom area. And it's kind of just an aesthetic thing. It doesn't really harm the plant at all unless it really starts to cover the roots. Then you might have an issue, but that's not really a big deal. Another cool thing about the semi-hydroponic system is not only is this a little more aesthetic than looking at dirt and bark and moss in a pot, but you can also hide that entirely and put it in a decorative pot like this. And the advantage of doing something like this is you can actually put a little more water in the bottom of it to expand the reservoir, so you have a little more leeway with how often you have to water it. So this might keep it now moist for up to 5 days just because of the extra water that is in the bottom. And again, the extra water sitting in the bottom isn't really a bad thing for orchid roots at all. In fact, most of the time you'll find it will grow all the way down the pot and into the water reservoir and love it just fine. So as long as it's not more than halfway up the pot, it should work just fine for you. It's a really cool system, really easy, really user-friendly because it's so straightforward. You can see what's happening with your plant. So that's why I've kind of started moving toward that for all my plants. But that's it for this one, Cattelya lutomania, and now we will move on to our Masdevallia. All right guys, so up next is going to be our Masdevallia that I got, and just once again, this one is Masdevallia Imperial Flame from Ecuador in Ecuador. So this one actually came in a little bit of sphagnum moss just because Masdevallias and Draculas don't appreciate really drying out. So I'm sure she had to pack them that way to get them all the way up to the States. So this one is just lightly wrapped, so it's really still minimal. And then there's the entire root ball. There's really not much sphagnum in between, so it makes it pretty easy. And it's going into new sphagnum, so it's not really that big of a deal because this stuff can last a while. And all of the roots seem really solid on this one.
So I'm just going to go through and cut off all of the obvious little filaments that don't belong.
So why are you using sphagnum moss rather than the clay moss?
Good question, Isaac. So I guess that kind of leads me into Masdevallia care. What a segue. So as I kind of mentioned a little bit, Masdevallias really do not like to dry out at all. Masdevallias like it both damp and cool, and so I'm putting it in a different system completely, which is actually utilizes semi-hydroponics in a very small way, but it's going to be going in sphagnum moss inside of a clay pot and then inside of a decorative pot with a little bit of the semi-hydro beads in the bottom, and that's going to essentially give us an effect of a very small humidifier and cooler of sorts, because the wet sphagnum moss is going to be in the clay pot, which is going to be constantly absorbing water from both the sphagnum moss and the water reservoir I'm going to have in the bottom, which is going to evaporate water constantly, which will keep the air cool and humid around this orchid. So that's why I'm preferring to use sphagnum moss over semi-hydroponics for Masdevallia orchids. Again, this is just the way that I do it. There are probably other ways that are just as effective and will give you great results, but this is what I'm choosing to do. Okay, so now that the orchid is all unpotted and all of the media and dead roots are removed, we actually have some spent flower spikes that we can cut off as well. With Masdevallias, especially once you get bigger ones, this can kind of be an annoyance because they can produce so many and they just dry out and turn into almost like straw that then gets all inside in between the leaves, and it just kind of can become a pain. So I find it's usually better to keep up on it as they die rather than just letting them dry up and make a mess, but that's just me. So here's the pot that is going immediately into. Like I said, I'm going to be utilizing some semi-hydro beads in the bottom. This pot kind of has a big hole in the bottom, so I'm just going to place one good-sized semi-hydro bead right over it so that all of these smaller beads don't fall out. And I'm going to just put, as it falls out of the bottom, I'm just going to put a thin layer in the bottom. The reason I'm doing this is to create a very small water reservoir in the bottom that will constantly evaporate water, and I don't want to have sphagnum moss just sitting in water. So I'm adding that inorganic medium just over it, and this doesn't really affect the orchid in any way, like I mentioned earlier with mixing organic and inorganic media, because it's not growing in the inorganic media, and therefore it won't be creating any anaerobic pockets that it might be living in. So that's just a little fun fact. So we're just gonna place a very thin layer of sphagnum moss in the bottom, just something like that, just to give us a level for where the roots are going to be sitting.
And I'm kind of going to mimic Brad's method of Brad's greenhouse, because he does this thing when he repots in sphagnum moss,
where he kind of places a little bit on it and just kind of slowly wraps it up. And I find that it makes a very even layer around it, and if you're just using the pressure from your hand to lightly hold it, it's not going to get too compacted. And so you just kind of keep going around, lightly putting more layers on it until it's about the size of the pot that you're putting it in, maybe a little bigger just to ensure that it fits snugly. But you see how we have that moss ball going?
This is long fiber sphagnum moss, so it's all just going to kind of stick together very well, and it's really just the best thing to put these orchids in because they freaking love it. So that's about our moss ball. Let me grab the pot to show you guys the size.
So it's kind of the size of the pot, and then we'll just kind of plop it in. And then if we do need to add some more, which it doesn't feel like we do, you can just add some on top and lightly tuck it in wherever it needs to be. It's important when you're potting with sphagnum moss, number one, not to pot them too deep because it does stay very, very wet, especially after you've watered it, and you don't want to rot any of those growths. And it's also very important that you don't pack it down too tight because it'll just be waterlogged and won't be able to drain, and it just won't create very good conditions for your orchid. So you just want to lightly pack it in there, just enough to fill the pot and also securely hold the orchid in place. And that's how you know that it's potted pretty well. Now I'm just going to tuck its tag back in, and to finish off this little potting, we're going to put it in its decorative pot, and then we will fill it with some water in the bottom to create that reservoir, and this Masdevallia will be good to go. Alright, thank you guys for sticking around and watching this video while I repotted a Masdevallia and a Cattelya. I hope that it was helpful for you guys if you're repotting either one of these kinds of orchids. I actually got a few more plants at the orchid show that might be featured in some upcoming videos, whether it be repottings or just care videos or something different altogether. And also stay tuned for updates on the fish room that is happening, because I have lots of things to do there, lots of updates like this behind me. Let me know what sort of things you would like to see me do in the future, whether regarding plants, orchids, fish, stuff like that, maybe even reptiles in the future. I don't know, we'll see. Anyways, if you guys like this video, please leave it a like. Alright guys, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time, bye.
Anyways, if you, Jewel, anyways. Okay. Oh, now my face.